Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you have joined from. Thank you for taking the time to join the webinar. My name is Kumar. I'm a director of marketing here at Manage Engine. For about 20 years now, I've straddled the world of IT service management, which is IT operations, and also in the past few years, I've been working on the privileged access management side of things at Manage Engine, contributing to the overall IAM platform that we have here. And it's good to have you all with us today. And let's get started. So, what we're going to talk about is, in the IAM context, we're going to talk about centralized governance of decentralized identities. Now, the title may look fancy, but we'll get to that. I'll qualify that in a bit. But the point is that modern identity landscape, as you all know, has become increasingly complex, right? So you have both human identities and machine identities. And the kind of digital transformation that our enterprises have undergone in the past few years, I think has fundamentally changed how we manage and verify human identities. We are now in a world where a person's identity exists across multiple dimensions, right? So in a typical enterprise, a single user has numerous digital identities spread across cloud services, internal systems, third-party applications, and that makes identity management more complex, right? You also have uh, digital identities, federated identities, biometric identities to deal with. And with this on one side, you also have an explosion of automation, IoT devices, APIs, service accounts. And that means non-human identities, right, often outnumber human identities. And if you look at the modern cloud architectures, that we have now, right, or even hybrid architectures, you have these services needing to authenticate each other, and you have, a very complex web of machine-to-machine identity management. And these machine identities typically require different management approaches, and each of these, present unique security challenges, right? And because these identities have, one, privileged access, and two, they operate autonomously, right? So if you're there and if you face the same set of challenges, would you put a +1 in the chat box, please? So if you, yeah, so I can see people, saying, nodding their heads and saying yes. This is stuff that we deal with. And if you look at the challenges, right, because of this explosion of human and machine identities, right, you deal with identity sprawl, where organizations struggle to manage the growing number of both human and machine identities, right? And then the second challenge is security, where you got to protect identities from theft and misuse, even as you maintain usability and contribute to employee experience, right? You want authentication to be easier for the users, but at the same time you got to protect those identities. And then you got to completely take charge of the lifecycle management, be it provisioning or managing or decommissioning identities, across their life cycle. That needs to be managed. And of course, right, there's a whole lot of compliance and regulatory requirements that call for identity protection and privacy, and this is across different jurisdictions. And finally, right, the explosion of identities, right, has resulted in companies moving towards implementing zero trust architectures, where every identity needs to be continuously verified, right, on an ongoing basis. So we ran, a survey sometime in 2024, where management surveyed about 3,000 plus experts spanning a wide range of industries, roles, and demographics to understand what they have to say about the current state of identity security. And some very interesting stats showed up. 45% of the respondents, say their organization use four or more vendors for identity management, right? And as if this weren't enough, a majority of the folks actually said that they would need to adopt even more tools to deal with the current need, right? And when all this, with all the tools in place, right, with the need for even more tools, right, only about 40% of CISOs actually said that they have complete control over privileged identities. That's the irony here, right? We're overflowing with tools. We're perennially short of tools to manage, right? We need more. We're platform hungry, we're tool hungry. And even as we move in this direction, right, we do not have the visibility and control that we need over the privileged identities. And very quickly, right, uh, I've just summed up a bunch of technologies that we use to manage identities today. And most of you, work with, um, a few or perhaps everything here, right? How many of you say I have, at least four of these technologies implemented? If you have at least four of these technologies implemented, would you put a +1 in the chat window? Right? At least four or more. Okay. So each of these tools, serve a very specific purpose, and they also have overlapping use cases. So you want to centralize IT identity management by storing and authenticating uh, uh, user and machine identities. You use directory services. Could be on-prem AD, or could be cloud Azure AD, Okta, whatever, right? And then you want to allow users to authenticate once, and you want to simplify user access management. You want to reduce password fatigue, right? You then start using single sign-on, and then you want to strengthen your identity management and ensure that you have multiple forms of verification, right? Then you start using MFA. Okay. And then what do? You start worrying about, once you're authenticated and all that, you start worrying about access, and you want to ensure that the right users have the right access at the right time, and you want to enforce this through policies, through access reviews and lifecycle management, right? And then that is where IGA steps in. And then you talk about, after speaking about access in general, you narrow it down and say, oh, you know what, but there are very critical systems. Privileged access needs to be provisioned for these critical systems. So you have PAM coming in, right, where you secure, monitor, and control access to systems and data for privileged users. And with the advent of cloud infrastructure, the hybrid IT infrastructures that we all support, right? You want to manage cloud identity risks by monitoring and controlling permissions across multi-cloud environments. So you want to detect excessive privileges. You want to enforce least privilege access for both human and machine identities on the cloud. And that's where your CIEM platforms come in. And on the other side, you also, irrespective of, whether you're a hybrid infrastructure or a on-prem infrastructure or a cloud infrastructure, you need to secure digital identities. You need to ensure that your certificates are issued. You need to, ensure that users are authenticated, devices are authenticated, services are able to communicate seamlessly by ensuring that your certificates are in place. You want to issue, manage, and validate your digital certificates. And finally, right, you also want to focus on key management, to generate, store, and control your cryptographic keys, which you typically use for authentication, encryption, digital signatures, and whatnot. So while we saw a bunch of challenges because of the explosion of human and machine identities, and we look at tools as a bunch of tools to manage these as possible solutions, right? All of these tools, they do serve very specific purposes in the IAM scheme of things, but they come with their own issues, right? On one side, you have integration complexities where different systems have incompatible authentication methods or data formats, protocols. So there's a complexity there. And then you have security inconsistency, where these different tools have varying security controls, policies, and that can actually create vulnerabilities, right? Because every system can handle authentication and access in a very different way from the other. And then you'll have to start thinking about the user experience, right? Which could get very fragmented across these different platforms. Not to mention maintenance overheads, where supporting and updating multiple IAM solutions would require significant investment of expertise and time across platforms. And obviously, you're going to increase costs, operational costs, and staffing requirements. And finally, right, these different systems may have different levels of logging and reporting capabilities. So when it comes to generating, being ready for a compliance regulation or an audit challenge, right, it's difficult to maintain, audit trails in many different places and demonstrate compliance, right? So if you think you face the same challenges, be it integration complexity or maintenance overheads or compliance and audit challenges, user experience fragmentation, or security inconsistency, please put a +1 in the chat box, please. Lovely. Okay, so is consolidation the answer, right? Is it can I just do away with everything, come up with one identity platform, a one size fits all solution for IAM, right? No, I don't think, personally, I don't think that's a solution, because specialized tools are often necessary to address specific IAM functions, right? Like we just saw. But at the same time, right, you'll have to start worrying about tool sprawl. You'll have to start worrying about, the issues that may arise out of these multiple platforms. And organizations should start looking at opportunities to streamline and consolidate where it makes sense, because it's definitely not a one size fits all approach for any as far as any IAM strategy is concerned. So we'll have to find a balance between ensuring security, enforcing access, having a rock solid IAM strategy on one place, even as you look at consolidation and a centralized governance on the other. So which means you got to identify specific needs, functions that are necessary to your organization, and you adopt the tools that fits the scheme of things, right? And you also should look at implementing tools that work together and support centralized governance. This is important because there's No point in going shopping for tools, adding to my portfolio of tools if they cannot talk to each other, if they cannot ensure a smooth employee experience in the organization, if they cannot help us ace compliance and audit challenges. So, in the midst of all this, right, where does PAM come into place, right? So you have a bunch of tools that you saw that you probably use today, right? And PAM basically you in your IAM solution stack. And what PAM does is, it kind of helps consolidate, right, privileged identities, right, does a little bit of everything. It helps you consolidate like, a directory service would. It helps you offer seamless access, not only seamless but secure access to your uh, privileged resources, right, at a very high level, right? So on one side you have the ability to discover and manage all kinds of privileged identities. So you can create a central inventory of privileged identities and their associated access rights, permissions, usage patterns, and everything in one place, right? And then with PAM, you can actually start governing access permissions across different environments. So you enforce least privilege, you start monitoring sessions, you control the privileged account usage. And then, there is the problem of hard-coded credentials in the kind of, low-code environment uh, that we're all in, right? There's a lot of custom app development that happens. And this is part of any digital transformation experience. So typically, right, these come with uh, the risks of uh, embedded passwords and scripts or applications or DevOps pipelines, right? So when you have this, right, when you have a PAM platform, right, it helps you manage hard-coded credentials by storing them in a secure vault and replacing them with, very specific, just-in-time access with dynamic access, and uh, you most importantly automate credential rotation. So these are encrypted, periodically updated, and accessed only when needed, right? And also, would PAM operate in isolation? Not at all, right? So PAM enables, streamlines cross identity management by integrating with um, different identity providers, directory services, and cloud platforms to ensure consistency across policies, when it comes to human and machine identities. And this is, across platforms. That's the kind of user experience and consistency that we're talking about. And finally, right, when it comes to certificate lifecycle management, PAM platform helps you unify uh, certificate lifecycle management by securely storing, issuing, rotating, and revoking digital certificates. So you ensure that all of this happens, the authentication, the encryption, and the compliance, right? All of this happens without manual intervention. So over the next 20-25 minutes, right, we're going to delve at a very high level into Manage Engine PAM 360, right, which is our privileged access management platform. And we're going to see how PAM can actually help you, right, centralize governance of decentralized identities, and how you can overcome the challenges that we saw, because challenges caused by the explosion of identities, challenges caused by the proliferation of different tools. So the PAM platform from Manage Engine, which is PAM 360, can go the distance in helping you overcome these challenges. Okay, very quickly, we're going to cover about 5 use cases, right? The first fundamental use case, right, that is solved with PAM 360. And before that, before I proceed any further, how many of you here actually use a privileged access management platform? If you use a privileged access management platform, it could be anything. Would you please put a +1 in the chat window, please? Okay, I have a 0, which means okay. So yeah, so it's interesting, right? Now I don't know if I should take that as a yes or a no, but point is, right, when you start with a PAM platform, the very basic that you get to do is to discover and manage all identities. So you can securely store, share, and manage all your privileged human and machine identities from a single vault. That's the first goal, very basic goal. So you vault, right? And then you're able to automatically reset passwords of your privileged resources, which may be servers, databases, network devices, and other resources, right? Automatically and periodically, right? So you improve the security posture of your organization. And the third fundamental outcome of using a PAM platform like PAM 360 ensures that you are in control over who accesses these privileged resources, right? So you can govern very fine-grained access controls. So let me quickly show you a video demo, right? We consciously wanted to have a video demo, so when you get the presentations, the videos are embedded, and you don't have to create an account, go all the way, try figuring things out by yourself. So you just have to hit the play button and listen to the recording, and you have the functionality unfold, right? So you, on this window, right, on the screen, you see the different types of identities, right? Different kinds of resources, be it SSH keys, certificates, cloud entitlements, everything, on the left-hand side of the screen. So like I said, different kinds of identities with all the data, right? Be it on-prem, be it on the cloud, is available in one single pane of view. That is the first thing. Now I go into a resource, right? And I can create static or dynamic groups of resources. And into these groups, right, I actually can define automatic periodic password resets at a group level, right? So what happens is, for the resource group, right, I can set a password reset schedule. Now here it's configured to run every 30 days. And you also not only change the passwords, you also keep people informed. So there's also a notification schedule that you can configure, right? And once you do that, right, you can also configure access controls. So I go into a resource and I configure access control. So I can actually nominate administrators, right? I can create a list of authorized admins that can approve access into this particular resource. So I've added a couple of people, and I can actually exclude people who do not need this authorization, who can just go ahead, access this particular resource, right? You also, have a bunch of settings. So once there is a request that comes for privileged access into to this resource, you can configure a bunch of things, and this includes enforcing approval by at least a certain number of administrators, right? You can enforce users to provide a request, a reason for password retrieval. right? You can, at the end of the access time, you can choose to provide grace time, right? You can actually uh, terminate, access to the resource within a specified period of the approval time, right? You can void requests after a certain number of time if they're not approved, right? So you can reset the password or key after, exclusive use by the user. So here's a bunch of things, right, you can actually do to ensure that privileged access is governed and very secure to your resources. And this is all a very resource group specific setting. And once you do this, all of this is uh, automatically executed. Okay, so and finally, right, uh, you have the option to provide very just in time privileged elevation mechanisms. So you want to allow administrators to provide elevated access for users temporarily, right? You want them to be able to perform necessary privilege tasks within a specified time frame. And when you do that, right, you are able to uh, actually enforce just in time access with everything that we saw now, including privilege elevation. So what I'm trying to do is I elevate resource accounts to local admin groups and domain admin groups, and the time period for access will, like we configured in the miscellaneous tab settings, and post which the user would be removed from the elevated local or domain groups. So that's with uh, password resets, that's with access control. Okay, the second thing where PAM platform like PAM 360 can help is with CIEM, right? Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management. Now, with SIM, you can actually extend privilege access controls, PAM controls, to secure and govern your cloud entitlements, right? You proactively identify, mitigate risks, provide, post by uh, could be access permissions or policy violations or risky misconfigurations across your cloud environments, right? So you got to basically, the SIM module helps you scan and monitor your cloud environments, you to identify access permissions, unused or stale accounts, inadequate segregation of duties, any policy violations, right, that can expose your critical accounts and resources. So with that said, now this is a pretty interesting module, at least my favorite in uh, uh, PAM 360. So let me quickly take you over the SIM tab, and in the SIM tab you have the AWS dashboard. Okay, so let's spend a minute here. So the AWS accounts dashboard, inside PAM 360 typically gives you a very comprehensive view of your IAM users, roles, and user groups within your AWS account, right? And not only does that give you visibility, a comprehensive view, also gives you a view of the different security postures and risks that these accounts pose in the cloud environment. So once you discover an AWS account, right, you can access the dashboard to also gain key insights into identity privileges, attached policies, services, and permissions, right? A bunch of things you see on the screen. So one is access privileges. So here we show the total number of identities in your AWS account um, that have the uh, access privileges risk. So you click into the tile and you can view a list of IAM users and roles with unused permissions. We'll get to that in a bit, okay? Then you have the non-MFA users, where the total number of users without configured MFA in the AWS account is listed, right? Then you have stats on the shadow admins, where you highlight the total number of identities in the AWS account with administrator privileges. And then you also have data on inactive identities, where you see the total number of inactive IAM users and roles in the AWS account. So this is all pretty comprehensive. And finally, you have something called the overall impact, where we kind of classify the risk as impact as high, medium, low, and critical, right? Because of these compromised identities. Okay, so this is the AWS dashboard, and you have, like I said, a bunch of data on the dashboard that give you an insight of what's happening with your identities, roles, and user groups inside your AWS account. And once you get into the risks tab, right, you get information about the risks, and these are PAM 360 defined risks identified on your AWS account. Now, these may be classified again, high, medium, low, whatever, across users, groups, and roles. So like you see, you see the active risks across, non-MFA users, across, shadow admins, across user groups, roles, access privileges, each of these by, like I said, users, groups, and roles, right? So once you see the risks, right, you want to remediate those risks. And before that, you just click on, let's say, access privilege for a user, and you go ahead and click on the details. So what you see is you see something called the access map. So the access map in PAM 360 is a feature that basically gives you a very graphical representation of access permissions and standing privileges, right? Associated with each user. So be it policies or permissions or services associated with each identity. It could be, a user group, or role within the AWS environment. You get a comprehensive view of whatever I said, policies, permissions, and services associated. So here we have an access map for a particular user on an EC2 instance, and I see that there's a ton of unused permissions, right, for this identity. So what do? I immediately, right, try to remediate the access privileges risks. So I take a look at all these unused permissions, right, and I click on the risks and remediation tab, and I click on, I'm sorry. Okay, let me come back here. All right, so I click on risks and remediation, and I click on remediate access privileges, because this is exactly what we need to do. And once you do that, right, you find a comprehensive comparison between the identities currently attached IAM policy and the PAM 360 recommended inline policy, right? So the suggested inline policy retains only essential permissions. So we remove excessive or unused permissions based on whatever activities we track during the designated CloudTrail retrieval period in AWS. So when we do that, we get the picture of what the access permissions are, access privileges are, right? And you remediate. So when you hit remediate, PAM 360 automatically replaces existing policies with the recommended inline policy, right? In IAM. So which means you've basically adhered to the principle of least privilege by removing the excess privileges. Okay, so on the cloud. So this is with the SIM module of PAM 360. The next is certificate lifecycle management. And if you look at the explosion of certificates, we have thousands of user devices, that access corporate networks, and hundreds of them requiring to access privileged systems, right? So we all use certificates because we want to securely authenticate these devices. We do the SSL, TLS certificates. You want to validate the devices, and you want to encrypt two-way communication. All that is great, but you know what? That also means that IT admins have to track hundreds of certificates every day. You got to constantly monitor usage, stay on top of certificate expirations, and you need to detect and remediate your configuration vulnerabilities, and so on, right? So the good news is that PAM 360 comes with a built-in certification management module, right? Which gives you complete visibility and control over your SSL and TLS certificate lifecycle management. So whether it is, discovering certificates or consolidating them, or creating or deploying, renewing, and managing keys and certificates, right? Along with privileged accounts, right? PAM 360 helps you do that, right? At a very high level, you can discover SSL and TLS certificates. How many of you have, say, I have an automated way to manage certificate life cycles today? How many of you have tools for CLM? If you do, please put a +1 in the chat box, please. Chat window, please. Okay, so how many of you say, okay, I do this manually? I presume the rest of you do it manually. But in this day and age, right, given the kind of 90-day mandate that's coming up, well, at least, that is in the discussions now among, in the browser consortium, right? We could be looking at updating certificates every 90 days. And if you're going to do this manually, it may not be the most effective way to manage certificates. Anyway, so PAM 360 comes with a CLM module, like I said, where you can discover SSL, TLS certificates across, heterogeneous environments and endpoints. You can centralize certificate lifecycle deployment to target systems and applications. You can stay on top of renewals through expiry alerts and all of that. You get alerts in your mailbox, and you just have to do a click to renew. We want to see how, right? And we also leverage out of the box integrations with third party CAs, right? You have the whole list here, and to track different certificates from different CAs from a single interface. And you can also exclusively manage certificates from the Microsoft Certificate Store and anything issued, the Microsoft Certificate Authorities. So very quickly, right, let me take you to the CLM module of PAM 360. And the first thing that you see is you see a bunch of certificates from different CAs, right? And each of these, have the certificate name, the order number, the user associated with the certificate, the validity, the purchase date, and the expiry, and all of that. So you have the whole list of CAs, you have the whole list of certificates, all consolidated in one place, right? And this is, across different vendors. And if I need to renew a certificate, all I need to do is go to the specific vendor. I can just click on renew certificate, select the certificate, right? Hit renew and fill out the details, verify the domain and all of that. And automatically PAM 360 takes care of getting in touch with your CA and get the updated certificate and install it in your infrastructure. So that's how easy it is. And if you want to order a new certificate, absolutely, you just go ahead, provide a list of details, and you order a certificate. So this is all centrally managed. So certificates are a very, very important type of machine identities, and these are, only increasing by the day. On one side they're increasing, on the other side their validity. It was once, you all know, it was the validity was for about 2 years, a few years ago, and then it came down to a little over a year, right? And now we're already talking a 90-day mandate. So an explosion of machine identities, and with a very reduced validity, and the least you could do is automate the lifecycle management of certificates, and PAM 360 helps you exactly do that, right? And the next thing, important way that you can centralize and manage your identities is, to manage your hard-coded credentials, right? So pretty much, right, every organization has DevOps team, and I don't have to say that hard-coded credentials, right, and absence of credential security within DevOps system uh, are a huge source of vulnerabilities for an organization, right? And any malicious insider with access to credentials in plain text can actually establish and expand their footprint inside the IT infrastructure. So that's that opens a big can of worms, right? And platforms like PAM 360 help you address these risks. So the risks posed by embedded credentials, right? So what we basically do is we facilitate integrations with different CI/CD platforms, RPA tools, and container platforms, right? Be it Jenkins or Ansible, Puppet, Chef, Kubernetes, anything, right? And so these integrations typically, help processes and applications fetch credentials directly from the PAM 360 repository, right? So no more hard-coded credentials. So you can carry out privileged operations, anything, be it automating and access provisioning, you know, be it deploying a build, with very granular control, right? You can actually manage all of these using PAM 360. So you can actually include a layer of privileged access security to your Kubernetes orchestration workflows, right? You can ensure hassle-free, uninterrupted functioning of CI/CD pipelines, because when passwords are changed, these processes get terminated, they hit a roadblock. But when they're stored in PAM 360, there's automatic fetching of credentials, there's automatic authentication. So there's the passwords are rotated, updated, so there's no interruptions that happen, right? So what we're going to see is a couple of examples. So one is the PAM plugin for Jenkins, and the other is for Kubernetes, right? So the PAM 360 plugin for Jenkins uh, is specifically, for secrets management in Jenkins, and you kind of improve the security posture of your DevOps pipelines. So once the plugin is enabled, the PAM 360 plugin is enabled in Jenkins, you ensure that all the required credentials are retrieved only from the PAM 360 vault. So every time a job is run, right, instead of using hard-coded credentials and plain text or script files, right, you would ensure that Jenkins reaches out to PAM 360 and uh, retrieves the required credentials. And then once the credentials are retrieved, they can be used, to, connect to a remote server for build activation, basically whatever you need to do in your CI/CD or developer environments. And yeah, like I said, there are instances where users are unable to run jobs because they logged out of the target application or server using because of an outdated password. Now, when you have everything stored in PAM 360, they're regularly rotated and updated. Uh, so you don't have to, you ensure that only the latest passwords are retrieved from the PAM 360 vault, ensuring that the jobs are smoothly run. Okay, so here's how the PAM plugin for Jenkins works. And this is a resource with an administrator account, so in PAM 360. So let's say I go to Jenkins and I enable the PAM 360 plugin, and here's a developer that is building and executing, let's say, a freestyle project using this specific account. So what I do is I go ahead and configure I go ahead and configure the credentials into my Jenkins project, right? And this is from PAM 360, and I run a build, I execute a build. And when I do that, right, the build is automatically executed. It is successful, okay, because the credentials were retrieved from PAM 360. Now I go back to my audit logs in PAM 360, and I find that this password, this particular administrative account, right, was the password was retrieved by Jenkins. It is clearly saved as part of the audit logs for compliance purposes. So this is, how the PAM plugin for Jenkins works. And the other example that I wanted to show is the Kubernetes integration, where you can actually manage secrets, from Kubernetes with PAM 360. So here you see a bunch of the Kubernetes cluster showing up as a resource in PAM 360. What you can do is you can actually associate Kubernetes secrets to an account of a resource. You can uh, select the secrets, the key, and you can associate, right? And once you do that, we can add. Okay, the association is done. All right. And then once this is done, you can actually add the resource to a group and reset the password, just like we saw in the access control slide a while ago. So this is how you and yeah, scheduled password resets, access controls, and everything. So this is how PAM 360 helps streamline and secure your CI/CD pipelines with the Kubernetes integration. And finally, the last aspect of streamlining, of centralizing your identities is to streamline cross identity management. And so using PAM 360 SCIM connectors, you can actually integrate with supported business applications. And that includes your IGA tools, your IAM tools. Basically, you streamline user management and access provisioning. So when you do this, right, you help your administrators grant, revoke, modify user access, both at a user level, at a group level, from a unified platform, right? That's the whole point of cross identity management, right? So you eliminate context switches, you maintain consolidated audit logs. So very quickly, I will show you how um, PAM 360 enables SCIM for you. So here's an example of how PAM 360 works with uh, Microsoft Entra ID. So a list of users in PAM 360, you do not see the name Fazil Rasak here. It is not available. Right now, we're going to provision Fazil Rasak in PAM 360 from Microsoft Entra ID. So how do we do that? We go ahead, and I've already integrated PAM 360 SCIM with the Microsoft Entra ID. And as an enterprise application, I've added it in the PAM in the Entra ID console. So once I go there, I have this user called Fazil in the list of users. So what I do is I provision the user Fazil on demand to PAM 360. So basically, I sync this user with PAM 360 so that I can create a Fazil account in PAM 360 just directly from Entra ID. So I get a success message. We're shown that the user has been successfully synced with PAM. And when I go back to Manage Engine PAM 360 and refresh the user list, let me refresh that. Okay, now I see Fazil Razak, and he's been provisioned from Entra ID. And this is through the SCIM support that PAM 360 offers. So I go to the audit logs, and I can see that I'm refreshing. Okay, I'm going to the user audit, and I see that a new user called Fazil Rasak has been added by the SCIM configuration in PAM 360, right? So that, was like a breeze. So that's with SCIM. So we've seen a bunch of ways PAM 360, right? And generally privilege access management platforms help you centralize these identities, being it, the very basic of securing vaulting your passwords, your privileged accounts, to providing access to password resets, to access management, to cloud infrastructure entitled management, to certificate lifecycle management, to centralizing and managing hard-coded credentials, to cross identity management. We've seen how PAM 360 and PAM tools in general can help you consolidate and centrally govern your identities. And when you do that, right, you not only do this with a PAM platform, but you also go achieve much more, right, when it comes to managing these identities, be it privilege session management, or privilege elevation and delegation management, policy-based access control, endpoint privilege management, having your user behavior and analytics in one place, comprehensive audits and compliance reports, some of which we saw now, and basically, um, uh, business workflow automation. So you can, weave in your privileged access management workflows for secure onboarding, secure offboarding, for secure IT change management, and all of that. So not only do you centrally manage and govern these identities, right? Not only do you centralize them, but you also make, your infrastructure and operations a whole lot secure with PAM platforms, and like we saw with Managed in PAM 360. So that pretty much brings me to the end of my talk. And if there are any questions, right, we'd be happy to take. Otherwise, you can always get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to answer those for you. So we would send you a copy of the recording with the slide deck, and the slide deck would have everything, all the videos of the capabilities, functionalities that we discussed today. And I do not see questions at the moment. So would be happy to take any of your questions offline. Thank you so much for joining. We hope you found the webinar useful, and we wish you all the very best in your IAM strategy. And we hope that you would look to privilege access management to centrally govern and manage your decentralized identities. Thank you very much.